Okay, here's my sourdough. So, step one, which I already did, but step one is to make sure that your starter is active. So I have a starter already done. We're just gonna assume that you already have a starter and it's active. Okay, so here's my starter. It's already been fed. You can see how bubbly it is. It has a nice rise to it. So I fed it and it grew and grew and grew and grew. It's been growing, I want to say about 5-6 hours now. You don't have to let it sit that long, but you can see it's nice and active, okay? And basically, that's step one, is to make sure your starter is active. We want it to be nice and fed and very, very active in order to put it into our dough. And now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna follow our recipe, and I will put the recipe in the description. And this is our next step, step number 2. And all I'm gonna do is I have a weigh scale here. So we're gonna weigh out how much flour we want. So step number 2 is we're gonna follow our recipe, which I will put in the description, and we're just gonna measure out. I have a weigh scale here. So we're gonna use our weigh scale. We're gonna measure out 400 grams of flour. This is to make 1 loaf. You can make 2. I just find it easier to make 1 at a time. So I have, sometimes I'll make 2 loaves, and then they're both fresh, and then I'll just stick 1 in the freezer. And then I don't have to make it as much, but I just find that it's better for the starter just to keep it out of the fridge and just to keep it active. So I just make a loaf I just would rather make a loaf like every day or every other day. Okay, so we got 400 grams of flour. I'm gonna put about 5 grams of salt. Okay, we're gonna put 160 grams of the starter. If it's a little bit more, don't worry about it. So I've got 174 in here. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to be as close to that as you can. And okay, so for the water, you want about the recipe calls for 230 milliliters of warm water. I just measure it again, and I want around 215. I want around 215 grams. Okay. Okay, and now I've got all 4 ingredients in there: my salt, my starter, my flour, and my water. And now I'm gonna put it onto my mixer. You can mix it with your hands too, but I'm just gonna stick it on my mixer, and I'm just gonna mix it until it looks like a ball, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I ran it through the mixer. It's just a big mess of a ball, and you can just do it with your hands too. It kind of sometimes seems like it's not gonna all incorporate, but just keep mixing it, just keep going. If you really have to add more water, you can, but just keep mixing it. It will get there. It's very sticky. That's why I use the mixer. But now I'm just gonna leave it for a couple of hours. This is at the point where I would maybe just leave it for like a morning. I'd go out for the morning and then come back at lunchtime. It's actually the afternoon now, so I'm just gonna leave it for, I don't know, a couple hours and see how it is in a couple hours. But I'm just gonna cover it with some saran wrap, and I'm just gonna leave it here. Basically, the water and flour are gonna start to break down and get goopier, and you'll be able to actually like stretch and fold it like an actual dough. So we'll see you in a couple hours. Okay, so just a tip for you guys, if you want to speed up that process, I find it easier just to leave it for like a whole morning. But if you want to speed it up, so for me, I did it this afternoon, I want to speed it up a little bit. So you can just put it on your mixer and let it blend for a little bit longer, or you can knead it and just work the bread a little. It'll turn into the dough a little bit faster, or you can just leave it. But basically, you can tell now that it has more of a dough consistency. And now we're gonna do step number 3. And we're just gonna stretch and fold it, and we're gonna do it 4 times total, okay? So we're gonna take the dough and we're gonna fold it in, take another side, fold it in. We're gonna take all 4 sides, stretch and fold it over, okay? And now I'm just gonna leave it, put the cellophane back over the top, and I'm gonna set a timer for half an hour, and then I'm gonna do the stretch and fold again. I'm gonna do the stretch and folds 4 times, okay? So that was number 1. So I'll see you back in about a half an hour to do number 2. Okay, number 2. Okay, we're gonna take a corner, stretch and fold, stretch and fold, stretch and fold, last corner, stretch and fold. Okay, we're just gonna let it sit again. It doesn't have to be exactly half an hour. Just sometimes I forget and it'll be like over an hour, so, which is fine, but I'm just setting a timer for now. So I'll see you in a couple minutes for number 3. All right, guys, number 3. Ready? Stretch and fold, stretch and fold, stretch and fold. Sometimes it is hard to stretch, and that's all right. Stretch and fold. I find as it gets closer to when we're gonna use it, it's harder to stretch, but that's all right. So now, leave it, and we'll come back for our final 4th stretch and fold. Okay, guys, so last time, okay, here we go. And I always find this last 4th one is always hard to stretch and fold, but it's okay. Just do as best as you can. Okay, and now I've got it in here, and I'm gonna cover it, and we are going to let it rise. So I'm just gonna cover it, and it is about 6:30. So we'll give it a couple of hours. I'll come back and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, peoples. So you can see how much bigger it is. It's risen. So all I'm gonna do is just punch it down just to get some air out of it. Okay, it's sticky, that's okay. I'm just gonna scrape it out onto a floured surface. Lightly floured. We don't want too much flour. Okay, and I'm just gonna take each part and fold it in. Just fold it in to make a nice little ball. Okay, this is what you don't want, a lot of flour. Okay, but you're just gonna mold it. You can use a scraper if you have one or you want to use one. But I just kind of mold it like this, but you just get into a circle and you pull back, because what you're trying to do is close up the bottom. It's not like a huge deal if you don't close up the bottom, but what will happen is when it rises, it will rise out the bottom instead of out the top, which is fine. It's not a big deal, but You can do this as long as you want. If you're using a different surface or you're not using flour, you're gonna want some kind of scraper. I have used my scraper, but I don't use it anymore because I just find that this is enough for me and I don't care if it rises a little bit out of the bottom. So I like to roll mine in some poppy seeds and sesame seeds. I'm just gonna get some more. Okay, and we're just gonna roll it around in the seeds. You don't have to do this. I just like adding them on the top. And then I have prepared a basket. This is just a random basket. Okay, you can have actual proofing basket, but I don't have one, so we're just gonna use this. And we put a towel, tea towel in here, a clean tea towel. And then I've just dusted it with some flour. And then I'm just gonna take my loaf, stick it in my basket. I'm gonna cover it up. And then I'm gonna stick it in the fridge overnight, and then we're gonna bake it first thing in the morning. Good morning, everyone. So I got my sourdough out of the fridge. Looks like this. I'm just gonna flip it over onto this sheet pan. I've just got some parchment paper on it. Okay, you can use something different if you really want to. There's lots of different things that you can use to cook it with, but this is the easiest and this is what I use. Okay, so it looks like that. And then you're gonna score your bread. So you can use like a special scoring tool if you want. I just have like a razor, and I'm just gonna put a nice little, you wanna make sure you're cutting pretty deep into it. Okay, so you can see that. And you can make little designs in it if you want. Yeah, go like whatever you want. I just make sure that I do at least one great big one. Okay, and then I've got my oven preheating. So if you can see it, it's on 500 degrees. So when you're cooking sourdough, the steam helps it to rise. So if you have like a pot, some people have like a heavy duty pot that you can put this into and then put the lid on it, and that will create steam like a Dutch oven. If you have a Dutch oven, you can use that. This is just simple and easy. I don't have any of that stuff, so this is what we're using. But what we do to create the steam is we're gonna use ice. Okay, so I'm gonna get my ice and I'm just gonna put it into any type of container. Okay, so I got this filled with ice. I'm gonna put this on the bottom shelf, and then I'm gonna put the bread on the top. Now, one important fact, preheat your oven for a long time, okay? Like I'm talking 45 minutes. So I have it at 500 for at least a half an hour. It's been about 40 minutes-ish, so usually I like to let it go a little bit longer, but I wanted to do the video now. So I'm gonna put the ice in. And then we're gonna take our bread, stick it in there, 500, okay? And we're gonna do 20 minutes. So we're gonna let it sit for, cook for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I'm gonna turn it down to 450, and we're gonna cook it for another 20 minutes, okay? In the meantime, I am going to show you what I do with my starter, because I'm going to make another loaf this afternoon. So I wanna show you how I'm gonna activate my starter now, give it some food, and teach you a little bit about what I do with the starter. So here's my starter. Okay, so you can see I showed it to you yesterday before we put it into our dough, and you can see how active it is. So this is what it looks like when it's like, see how it's very soupy? It has a little bit of bubble in there, if you can see that. Yeah, you can see the bubbles. but this is what it looks like when it needs food. It's like not very active. So all I'm gonna do, okay, is I am going to dump this out. So it's about here. I'm gonna dump it out so it's like empty to about here, okay? So I'm just gonna dump it into another container. You can see there's not, well, you can't really see. There's not very much left in there at all. It's hard to see, I know, sorry. But it's honestly like that much, okay? Now I'm gonna take my flour. So I used to like measure this all out. I just feed it now. So hopefully you can see. I just kind of gauge it. I like to give it a decent amount. Okay, we'll just give it a little bit today. So you can see I've filled it up to about here with flour. And then I'm going to, oh, it's all gone, honey. Okay, here you go. Okay, I'm just gonna fill it with a little bit of water. And then I'm gonna stir it. And you just want it to be incorporated. So if you can see it in there, it needs more water. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more water. Yeah, watch out. Careful. Okay, so I've got it incorporated. It's thick, but that's okay. You can see that. It's blended, and that's all there is to it. You just want to make sure that there's no big lumps and that it's blended enough. And I'm just gonna put a lid on it. And we'll be back in 20 minutes to lower our bread temperature. Okay, you can see it's rising in there. I don't want to open it too long, but we're going to turn the temperature down. Okay, we turned it down to 450. Put it in for another 20 minutes, and I'll show you what it looks like after. And there you have it. So this one rose out of the bottom a fair bit, but it's just like I was saying, when you were rolling it and closing it, it just wasn't like closed completely, but it's fine. It still cuts the same, it still tastes the same. You want some hot bread? We're gonna wait a little bit to cut into it, but we always like to have a nice warm slice. So, I by no means am a professional. I've only been doing it for a little bit, a couple months, and this is just after watching so many videos and finding different recipes and different methods. This is just what I have found to be the best and the easiest and what works for us. And hopefully that helps you. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Or if you have any tips,